Welcome to our CabSat TV studio right here at Oasis Enterprises in the main hall for CabSat 2015. Really pleased now to be joined by Corey Bridges, the CEO and founder of Lifemap Solutions. Corey, welcome to our studio.
Thank you, happy to be here.
Keynote speech from you on day one, and a really good title. I mean, I came in to see that. The secret of my success, failure. Explain some more of that. We'll come on to talking about the businesses you've worked with and helped push to the edge and really grow their strengths. So maybe you could talk us through that, including why success is failure.
Sure. Well, I think more accurately, failure can lead to success. So obviously a bit of a cheeky title, but it comes from a very real response to very real questions that I get. I've been traveling internationally in my career for well over a decade and a half doing extensive international travel, and the most common question I'm asked in different locations is, how do you guys in Silicon Valley do whatever you do that leads to such innovation, so many startups that become ultimately successful? What is the secret of that? And the answer to that is, don't be afraid to fail. And I realize the more that I've been asked that question, that there is as with anybody, there's a natural sort of a conservative nature of, well, I don't want to fail. It was about 12 years ago that I had a talk with a friend of mine in London, and he said, I can't afford to have a failed company on my resume. I can't afford even to be a mid-level or an entry-level guy at a company that ultimately went out of business. And I thought, my God, that seems incredibly constraining. That's going to get in the way of you taking risks, which is ultimately going to get in the way of you perhaps succeeding big. So what I thought I would talk about is that topic of don't be afraid to embrace failure, to risk failure. I'm not saying you need to fail, but at least smaller controlled failures can in fact lead, and in the cases of the companies I've worked with, have led to big successes.
And let's talk about those, because possibly the best web browser ever, Netscape, you're involved in that. But I mean, let's start from there and go all the way through, because it involves great names like James Cameron and of course Netflix, which now is a developed business, but it's still got a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I guess I'll touch briefly on some of those highlights that you mentioned. 20 years ago, when I was wet behind the ears, just about 26 years old, I was a product manager on the client team at Netscape, had the good fortune to work on the browser product. And that was where I cut my teeth on understanding how to introduce a product to market. And the mistakes that and to speak perhaps out of turn, some of the mistakes the company made were very illustrative. I think you learn more from failure than you do from success. So being occasionally, and then towards the end, frequently out-marketed by Microsoft, that taught me a lot about how to introduce a product, a technology to market, and then how to follow up that introduction with continuing to let customers, in that case, know what the benefits were of a product. So that was fertile training ground for me and other folks at the company to learn what to do as well as what not to do. Following that up, as I had the good fortune to do by being part of the original launch team at Netflix, myself personally, I took those lessons learned and executed, I think, incredibly, immodestly speaking, incredibly well done launch of that company, and then followed that up well. But personally, what I learned at that company is that I need to be in more dynamic environments. The specific work that I did at that company was fantastically interesting to write the launch plan and then execute that launch plan. But then after that, for me, I was just directing where the advertising dollars were going. So for me personally, that was less challenging and thus less interesting. I ended up leaving the company to help other companies become successful and launch, because that what I learned is I need to have that more dynamic environment. Shall I go on and talk about some of the others, or did
Absolutely,
you have any follow-up
because
questions?
I'm really getting the feel that it's disruptive and being disruptive and innovating that you get the buzz from, and that seems to fit very well with the people that you work with.
Yeah, I think so. What I've learned now at the ripe old age of 46 is some investors and some business folks tend to respond a little negatively to the term, just the sole term disruptive. So I often say now, positively disruptive, because disruption implies a certain, obviously, amount of chaos. But if you're in the right industry at the right time, which is critical, and you're executing properly, you can have positive disruption. It leads to greater opportunity, even as things are very chaotic. So at one point I ended up working alongside James Cameron at his, and in fact Vince Pace at their company Cameron Pace Group, which was dedicated to taking the technology, creating those solutions they made to shoot Avatar in 3D and productizing them, essentially, offering them to other film producers, other broadcasters, to allow them to create their content in 3D. And you talk about a very risk-tolerant couple of guys. Jim and Vince were fearless in the technology they built. They completely went against conventional wisdom and said, okay, we see an opportunity here, and obviously that paid off very well for them. So to see that risk tolerance up close and personal for myself, when I worked as VP of Technology with them, bringing the company to Europe, bringing the company to China, again, just huge lessons in the value of tolerating risk. You know, the SAS has a saying, "Who dares wins," and not to be glib about it, but by making very conservative, very staid choices, you're unlikely to have a big success. You can maintain a business, but if you're looking to create something or to enter into a new market, you've got to innovate, you've got to be open to risk, which means you have to be open to failure. You've got to embrace that possibility, become comfortable with it, to leverage, and even if you can, constrain your failure points so that you can introduce your product, whether it's a technological product or content. Try to introduce it to smaller groups ahead of time to make sure you're on the right track.
So that risk tolerance, CEO and founder of Lifemap Solutions, how does that translate to being the boss at the top? How risk tolerant are you, and how does that impact? I mean, tell us about Lifemap Solutions.
So right now, I'm in a new subcategory of high tech, the mobile health or mHealth space. What I've tried to do, happily I've been privileged to be relatively successful at this, but what I've tried to do through my career has been to find an area that's just about to explode, whether it's internet technology itself, entertainment technology, now mobile health, the mHealth revolution. Try to get there just at the right timing, not too early and certainly not too late, to be able to contribute to that, because I find that very interesting, and certainly it can be very lucrative if you get the timing and the execution right. So right now Lifemap Solutions is a mobile health technology company. We're partnered with Mount Sinai Hospital and Research Institution in New York, meaning we've got, hopefully, the best scientific minds, and we're working with them in Manhattan, and the best of the high-tech minds. We've got a headquarters in Manhattan, on site at Mount Sinai, and we've got a headquarters in Silicon Valley. Right. So hopefully we're drawing from the best talent pools of both of those aspects of the business. And we've just been pleased to announce yesterday that the first app that we've developed together was actually announced by Apple Computer at their event yesterday. We've built on Apple's new technology Research Kit, which enables researchers to create scientifically rigorous research studies facilitated through the iPhone. And this is just revolutionary, the notion of taking research studies out of the constraints of bricks and mortar locations and now managing them just like what we've seen happen throughout the rest of the internet, disintermediating the specific constraints of having neighborhood people come in and having a lot of high-touch one-to-one consent discussions. Now that all happens through the iPhone. So we've been very pleased to have had early access to this Research Kit technology to build a non-commercial research app called Asthma Health. And then we're following up ourselves with our commercial products coming in following weeks. But right now the emphasis is very excitingly on what we've been able to build with this early access to Research Kit.
Well, it sounds really, really exciting, and I hope the process that you highlighted way back in your 20s and early 30s as to what makes you successful, I hope that continues for a long time. Corey, thanks very much.